morning, we begin this Sunday morning with this upcoming week's debt ceiling negotiations. The Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, and House Republicans unveiling a plan to raise the debt ceiling while cutting spending, with hopes of getting a vote by this upcoming Thursday or Friday in the House. Right now, the national debt is at $31.7 trillion, with interest alone on that debt of more than $500 billion. Under this proposal from House Republicans, the national debt ceiling would be raised by $1.5 trillion, while spending levels would be rolled back to 2022 levels. The bill would also impose a 1% cap on future spending, claw back unused COVID-19 money, cancel IRS funding for new staff, and repeal green tax credits from the Inflation Reduction Act. President Biden did not have a serious response to the plan. Instead, he attacked what he called MAGA Republicans, saying that any spending cuts attached to the increase in the debt ceiling is a non-starter.
Folks, here's what's really dangerous. MAGA Republicans in Congress are threatening to default on the national debt, the debt that took 230 years to accumulate overall, unless we do what they say. They say they're going to default unless I agree to all these wacko notions they have. Default would be worse than totally irresponsible.
Joining me right now in this Sunday Morning Futures exclusive is the House Speaker, California Congressman Kevin McCarthy. Mr. Speaker, it's great to have you this morning. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me back on the show, Maria.
Well, you heard the president. He called you MAGA Republican extremism. He said these ideas are wacko. Did you threaten to allow the nation to default?
No, we're the only ones in Washington that are actually putting a responsible plan out that will raise the debt limit. Think about it, for more than 80 days it's been since I sat down with the president on February 1st to negotiate, to work through this, and he's ignored it. But I'm beginning to wonder about his thoughts. Think about what he's saying. When we say limit, save, and grow, when we limit the future spending of Congress, that's an idea by Senator Manchin to go at 1%. We're saying to save people's money to go back what we were spending just 4 months ago. What we're also saying is claw back that COVID money that was appropriated but sat there for 2 years and wasn't used. He actually signed the law that says the pandemic's over. Then when we talk about work requirements, Senator Biden voted for them. And just a couple weeks ago, when the Democrats had a very large victory in Wisconsin, they won the state Supreme Court, they passed work requirements on welfare by 82%. So does he consider his own party wacko and MAGA as well? I'm beginning to wonder about the words that he says and the thoughts that he's using, because the idea that he won't even negotiate for more than 80 days, he is now putting the country in default. We're the only ones being responsible and sensible about this.
Do you feel that you have the votes? Here's what Larry Lindsay writes from the Lindsay Group. Biden does have some unlikely allies. A handful of House Republicans are withholding support from the McCarthy plan. McCarthy has only a 5-seat majority, so you need almost every vote. Do you have the votes to pass this in the House this upcoming week?
Ray, we do have a very small majority, only 5 seats, one of the smallest we've ever had. But I cannot imagine someone in our conference that would want to go along with Biden's reckless spending. This is responsible. This is something that we have sat down for months, that everybody's had input in. It's not where everybody gets 100% of what they want. But when we send this to the Senate, we're showing that, yes, we're able to raise the debt ceiling into the next year. But what we're doing is we're being responsible fiscally and bringing our house back in order. It doesn't solve all of our problems, but it gets us on the right path. And this gets us to the negotiating table just as government and America expects us to do.
So do you feel that you can hold a vote this upcoming week? What are your plans?
We will hold a vote this week, and we will pass it, and we will send it to the Senate. And for more than 80 days, where the president has ignored us, called people names for things that he even voted for himself, makes no sense or logic to it. I think as president and the leader of the free world, this is one of the problems we have, challenges around this country and around the world. He needs to show leadership and come to the negotiating table instead of put us in default. This is risky what he's doing. He's threatening the markets. Think of his ideas. In the next month, if you actually have good credit, you pay more.
Yeah.
If you have bad credit, you get a discount. Who believes in these type of ideas? This goes against everything what America was created upon, that if you work hard, you can succeed. And that's the difference. Come to the table, negotiate, and do what is right.
Yeah, you mentioned that housing proposal. Isn't that the way we got into the worst housing crisis that anyone has ever seen back in 2007?
Maria, mark my words, when we look to the future and there's a new housing crisis and there's a new default, it is his actions, but it goes to something much deeper. It's a socialist belief that you reward bad behavior. So what does it tell the American public? First of all, there's no consequences for crime anymore. Secondly, you know what? Don't pay your bills because you get rewarded. Third, don't pay back your student loans even though you signed the paper and you said you would do it because you wanted an education. Somebody else will pay that for you. It takes away the work ethic in America. And for the idea for the president to think that's a wacko idea, no, that's an idea that built this country and made us stronger.
Yeah, it's a great point. And to be fair, you have many Democrats actually encouraging the president to sit down with you and negotiate. The strongest criticism came from Joe Manchin of West Virginia, who said, while it is reasonable to sincerely disagree with any specific debt ceiling approach, we will achieve a historic default if President Biden continues to refuse even to negotiate. So you, just to be clear, you have not heard a response from this president based on after your plan.
No, we're the only one that has a plan out there. And you know what's interesting? It's only human nature. When you want to avoid somebody to talk about something, you're afraid. You're not just afraid, but you know you've done something wrong. This is a president that has ignored one of the greatest crises we have before us, our fiscal problem. Every nation, every great nation has collapsed when they've overextended themselves. In the next 10 years, we will now spend $10.5 trillion just on interest. From 1940 and today, we've only spent $9 trillion. That means 17.5% of everything the taxpayer goes in is just going to pay interest on the debt. He weakens us, makes us more dependent on China. His overspending, he wants to spend more money than we spent during COVID. He added $6 trillion. That's where inflation was created. So he's creating inflation, making us dependent upon China, and then he's jeopardizing Medicare and Social Security. Because for the first time in a 10-year window, not just the highway trust fund, but Medicare and Social Security becomes insolvent. So it automatically gets cut. This rests upon his feet, not because he made a bad decision. The real decision is he's afraid to even negotiate.
Yeah,
I can't believe that the leader of the free world, and to choose the words, it makes me begin to wonder about what his thoughts are.
What do you mean?
I mean, who would go out and think an idea is wacko? It's something that he actually supported. Or Manchin says limit government of 1% growth. Every household, a debt ceiling is like giving your child a credit card and you hit the limit. Would you automatically just raise the limit, or would you first look at how they spent their money? We're raising the limit responsibly, but we're looking at our fiscal house and curving the waste, limiting the growth in the future, saving us taxpayer money, but also growing the economy by making us energy independent and getting us cutting red tape so we can build things in America. We could build those roads.
But how realistic is it to have a 1% cap for the next 10 years using fiscal year 2022 spending baseline for 10 years, only a 1% nominal increase every year? I mean, it sounds like a good concept, but for 10 years? And the other issue I want to ask you about is raising the debt ceiling only until next March. Do you really want to go through this whole process again next March during an election year, or are those two ideas negotiating chips on your part?
Its ability to negotiate. If the president wants to sit at a table and find a way that we can take the debt ceiling further and make other savings, I'm open to that. This isn't predetermined what has to happen, but right now the Republicans are the only responsible ones who are looking at the future of what the debt ceiling, looking at our fiscal house, and getting that in order. In 2011, we had a spending cap put in, and it saved us trillions of dollars. Do you know, when Republicans were in power for those 8 years, do you know how much discretionary spending went up? Not $1. We went down $10 billion, and we grew. You know what happens here is we have more money coming in to government than at any time in history. 20% of our GDP, when the 50-year average is 17. Our problem is when the Democrats took over, they increased spending and brought us inflation. They are spending at more than 23% of GDP, and the 50-year average is 21. He's taking us to 25. That is a sign that we saw in Venezuela, and he's leading the same way.
Wow. So you're going to have this vote this week, and you're expecting to pass it. You're also doing a Congressional Review Act with regards to China and the president's plans to get solar panels into America. Tell me about that. What is the problem with the president's plan on solar panels? Because it feels to many of us that this climate change agenda is sending all of the business to China. Batteries, solar plants, they're all made in China. So we've become more reliant on communist China.
Maria, you understand this China debate better than anyone. When we took the majority, we created a select committee on China because I'm very concerned about our future. What the president has done is not just about solar panels, it's anything to do with China. The dependency that he continues to push us, especially in the energy field. But right now, he just expanded the amount of money that government will subsidize for new renewable energy. But these solar panels are made in China. We block the ability for them to come, so now China's sending to other countries. You know what the president did? He lifted it and now allows China to send it to other countries, dump on the market, will go after American businesses. And you know what's economy is going to get stimulated? China, by using American taxpayers. That is what's wrong. That's why we have to be at the negotiating table, and that's why we have to change that. And Goldman Sachs just came out and said their plan that they put forth is going to cost us 3 times as much. So the Chinese economy is going to grow 3 times as much as they planned before because it's you, the American taxpayer, paying for it and subsidizing it because his president allowed it. We're going to repeal that.
Real quick on Russia and China and their influence over Africa. We are reporting all morning this morning about Sudan and the violence there. Your thoughts and what should the U.S. do? The embassy staff has been evacuated from war-torn Sudan.
First, I've got to thank the military for their work to get the people out safely. But this is a chaotic area and has been. But it goes to a much broader question. We have fewer allies today than when the president took office. Saudi Arabia no longer looks at America to be number one. We've got something in the world that we haven't had since the 1930s, an axis of power of China, North Korea, Russia, and Iran. We've now got our own allies. The only country this President Biden has had a state dinner for was France Macron, who recently came back from China saying they need to become less dependent upon America. We've got China going after the U.S. dollar, using our own allies to saying they'll start trading in yuans as well. That stems from a weak leadership in our White House. He says nothing. He allows a balloon to come over. He has weak policies that brings us inflation. And then he ignores the ability to even sit down and negotiate. He pulled us out of Afghanistan without listening to our without listening to our military. We're finding it in our hearings alone. That has weakened America in the stance, and we've watched it time and again. You know, Secretary Gates was right when he said long before this president took office, every foreign policy this president has made for the last 40 years has been wrong, and he's proving it, but he's making us weaker, and we can't sustain that much longer.
Well, Congressman, look, after you pass this bill, it goes to the Senate. What are your expectations for the Senate? And your approval ratings are up, certainly among Republicans and both sides. Congrats on that, on keeping these promises in terms of foreign policy. I know you're headed to Israel at the end of the week as well. But real quick, your expectations for the Senate on this debt deal.
Well, the Senate has to do something because under Senator Schumer, the only things I've watched him do is name March the main maple syrup and thank UConn for winning a basketball tournament. They haven't proposed anything. They don't even have their senators showing up for work. I mean, the Senate has done nothing. So you'll see the House Republicans are the only ones who are being responsible. We sat together. We asked to meet with the president starting February 1st. He ignored us. We will take action to make us fiscally stronger, less dependent on China, curve the inflation the Democrats brought, but also put us on a path where we'll grow this economy even stronger, make us energy independent, be able to cut the red tape so we can build things in America again. All right.
We will leave it there and continue to watch your work on all of this. Speaker McCarthy, thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Keep up the great work.
I appreciate that. Speaker Kevin McCarthy joining us in Washington. Quick break, and then the CCP is operating on U.S. soil in plain sight. 2 men were arrested in New York City last week for working as Chinese agents, running a secret police station in the heart of New York City. The Atlas Organization founder Jonathan D.T. Ward and the Gatestone Institute senior fellow Gordon Chang is with me next to examine the threat Communist China poses to the United States and the world. That's next.
in overtaking the United States. You cited the spy case or the police station that China had in New York to target Chinese Americans who were pro-democracy and so forth. We've been seeing this coming for a long time, and it's just the tip of the iceberg.
And that was Florida Senator Marco Rubio with me on this weekend's Maria Bartiromo's Wall Street over on Fox Business on the ominous threat Communist China poses to the United States and its national security. It comes as the FBI arrested 2 men in New York City last week for running a select Chinese police station, which was secret. We were the first to report to you on the existence of those secret Chinese police stations on the U.S. soil. I did so here, as well as on Mornings with Maria on Fox Business. These police stations, apparently we're told, are used to spy on dissidents against President Xi and the CCP. Joining me right now with more on the China threat are Atlas Organization founder Jonathan D.T. Ward and Gatestone Institute senior fellow Gordon Chang. Both are experts on the inner workings of the CCP. Jonathan is the author of the new book, The Decisive Decade. Gordon is the author of The Great U.S.-China Tech War, among other books. Gentlemen, it's great to have you both. Thank you so much. And Gordon, I believe it was you who first alerted me to the Chinese police stations in New York, and I was absolutely outraged by it. I went on the air and talked about it with others as well. What are your thoughts on this report that there are 6 other police stations that are run by the Chinese Communist Party in America?
Yeah, we have learned this from Safeguard Defenders, the Spanish-based NGO, and the New York Post. And the question is, why didn't we hear it from the FBI and President Biden? You know, the Chinese have been running around our country for decades. Chinese consular officials, Ministry of State Security agents, openly violating our sovereignty, committing crimes and getting away with it. So, of course, they thought they could open up fixed locations. So we have got to stop this because, look, spy balloons, police stations, fentanyl. The Chinese think that they can do whatever they want in our territory. And if we don't stop them now, this is going to get out of control.
Well, it is out of control already, I would argue. I mean, let's face it, they had the surveillance balloons sending military secrets back in real time. Just extraordinary what they believe they can get away with. And yet, Jonathan, Janet Yellen is calling for a constructive relationship with China.
Right. Well, Maria, the Janet Yellen speech last week was supposed to be a landmark speech on U.S.-China relations, but it included a section called Leading Together on Global Challenges, talking about how we have a joint responsibility to lead the way, that U.S.-China economic engagement is essentially a pillar of the administration's strategy, and that's all wrong. I mean, this is really, I thought it was a speech that actually showed a real lack of vision and even a lack of comprehension of the nature of this issue. I mean, we have to, maybe somebody needs to explain to Secretary Yellen how the CCP is investing the money that they've earned from 3 decades worth of economic engagement. They've built the largest navy in the world. They've built the largest missile forces, including 1,000 Dongfeng 21Ds, which are carrier killers. And they've made it absolutely clear that they seek to overtake us economically and to protect their expanding economic empire. So we are going to have to take this on seriously. And we need a strategy to win an economic contest with China. And that includes real containment, economic containment. So this speech didn't have a shred of that. And I think, fortunately, there's a bipartisan consensus on China emerging in Congress, and we're going to need more leadership from Congress, even if senior executive branch officials are in the wilderness on this.
Gordon, do they just not get it in terms of the national security issue here? I mean, let's face it, we had Michael McCall on the show last weekend, and he told me that they were completely surrounded in Taiwan by the biggest, show yet from Communist China in terms of fighter jets, an aircraft carrier, all surrounding the island nation of Taiwan, while the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee was there with other Republicans.
Yes, and it's difficult to understand the motivations and the thoughts of the Biden administration right now. But clearly, as Jonathan has said, they don't understand the world as it is. And I think we should take some advice from Confucius and rectify names. In other words, to tell the truth, to speak candidly. And the Biden administration won't do that. When the president is asked about the origins of COVID-19, when he's asked about all these other things that China's doing, he shuffles them off. He won't answer. And that is, I think, a matter of grave concern to the American people, because the president of the United States has made it clear that he really doesn't want to defend us.
Yeah. By the way, Gordon, this morning we're seeing the U.S. Embassy staff lifted out of Sudan. There is increasing violence there. You think China's influence is part of this?
Yes, we have to ask that question because the Russian mercenaries, the Wagner Group, have been destabilizing Sudan. Now, Putin doesn't have the money to do that. He's got his hands full with Ukraine. And so the question is, who is paying for these Wagner mercenaries? We know that China and Russia cooperate throughout Africa and throughout elsewhere. So we need to start asking that question. Where is this money coming from? And until we start asking that question, we're not going to get to a solution in North Africa.
Well, there was a report last week, Jonathan, that the White House is nearing an unprecedented action on U.S. investment in China. I'm not sure that I'm buying this. I also am not buying that this administration is going to do anything about TikTok, because I know the Democrats love TikTok to reach young people, despite the national security concerns that have been so well spoken about. Your thoughts on corporate America's role here in terms of investing in China and investing in the very companies that may very well at some point turn around and turn their guns on America?
Well, look, I think this is what we need in America now. We need our boardrooms. We need our C-suites. We need the officer corps of the U.S. economy. I mean, the officers of the Fortune 1000 and all the chief investment officers you can possibly get together to start to understand the nature of this problem, because we're going to need the private sector to help us win a global economic competition. As I laid out in the decisive decade, I mean, we really have a very short window of time in which to maintain a comprehensive lead over the People's Republic of China in the sort of strategic industries, emerging technologies, and the foundational industries. And we have to play this game worldwide. I mean, it's going to be a global economic contest. And you can't win this without our business leaders. I mean, they were essential to victory in the Second World War and really essential to maintaining the world's largest and greatest economy in the Cold War. And we're going to need them now more than ever. And the problem is that they've become too tied into the China market. They're taking on risks that I think are going to be, bad for not only the United States, but also for their own companies in not too far from now. So, I think having an executive order, I mean, we need more of that. We're going to have to look at restricting U.S. investment into China. Index providers like MSCI are really creating the vehicles for hundreds of billions of dollars to be poured into the People's Republic of China. And of course, that's all just spreading around the system into human rights atrocities and military buildup. And all of that is designed to for the CCP to win a global contest against the United States. So we're funding the rise and sort of efficiencies of our primary adversary, and that's the biggest mistake we may have ever made.
Gordon, the end game here in terms of the CCP, do you think the CCP wants conflict with America?
No, they just want to take us over without firing a shot, as it's said. And that really has been the Chinese playbook, subversion, as we look at all of its activities against the United States. We had the China ambassador to France yesterday question the sovereignty of the ex-Soviet states. China doesn't want to compete with us in the international system. It wants to take that system down. By the way, that system of competing sovereign states has been in place since 1648, and China wants to replace it with worldwide Chinese rule. They call it Tianxia, all under heaven. That's what they want to rule.
Amazing. Gentlemen, great conversation. We so appreciate you both. Jonathan Ward and Gordon Chang, thanks for educating all of us on this incredible threat. Thank you, gentlemen. Quick break, and then China's aggression has been met with very little response from President Biden, who did nothing after the CCP's surveillance balloon sent military secrets back to Beijing in real time and then covered up the COVID-19 disaster. We also have no evidence the president has ever pushed Xi Jinping on China's cover-up of COVID-19, its refusal to investigate the Wuhan lab where it likely originated. Why not? Next, the extent of the Biden family's business deals with Chinese companies and the impact it has had on the president's foreign policy.
This does, in fact, reach him. I wonder what their defense will be. I mean, this is just going on too much. And the like I said, the documentation that I've seen, I can't comment on all of it, but what I can comment on is that it is bad and it is getting worse. And it is showing illegal monies from Chinese communists flowing into this White House.
Wow, strong words of potential impeachment from House Oversight Committee member Congressman Tim Burchett with me on Friday on Mornings with Maria over on Fox Business on the potentially compromised position President Biden is in when dealing with communist China after the House Oversight Committee report on millions of dollars the Biden family has taken in from communist China. House Oversight Committee Chairman Congressman James Comer revealing that 6 more members of the Biden family may have benefited from the family's various business ventures around the world. The new information comes from examining the suspicious activity reports those reports sent by banks to the Treasury Department in transactions involving President Biden's family. Joining me right now to get to the bottom of it this Sunday morning with more in an exclusive interview is House Oversight Committee Chairman, Congressman James Comer. Mr. Chairman, good to have you this morning. Welcome.
Good morning.
What can you tell us about your latest findings and the Biden family receiving money from adversaries?
Well, we went into Treasury after a long battle to have access to those Treasury reports, thinking that there was a certain number of suspicious activity reports, the number that had been previously reported, and we thought that there were 2 or 3 Biden family members that would be implicated in these bank violations. Nearly 3 weeks later, we walk out of Treasury having poured over thousands of pages of documents, and I can tell you that there were more suspicious activity reports than had been previously reported, and many more Biden family members that were involved in the influence peddling scheme. We now have 9 and counting Biden family members who are zinged by at least one bank for receiving suspicious wires from our adversaries around the world.
So, in other words, adversaries, and including China, sent money directly to Biden family members into their accounts?
There's the key, Maria. They sent money to these LLCs that the Biden family members created. Now, that's another aspect of this. We went in thinking there were around a dozen LLCs. Through our informants and through our research over the past year and through other investigative reporting, we thought there were around a dozen of these LLCs that were created by Biden family members to disguise or launder where the source of the revenue was coming from. But there are many more LLCs. There are many more Biden family members, many more LLCs, and many more countries that were involved. I'll say this, China was probably the most reputable country that the Biden family was dealing with. And the question remains, what were these family members doing to receive this money? Right. There's no rhyme or reason for some of these Biden family members to receive any type of payment from our adversaries around the world, much less the number that we've uncovered, and we're still digging through these bank violations.
That's unbelievable. I mean, it couldn't be that they just wanted to hang out in the vice president's office, right? What were they paying for? One source sends me this. One of the huge benefits the Chinese may well have paid for was then Vice President Biden presiding over the signing of a Memorandum of Understanding, an MOU, on May 7th, 2013, between our Public Company Accounting Oversight Board and the Chinese Regulatory Commission to waive federal auditing requirements for hundreds of Chinese companies listed on U.S. exchanges. Was that part of it? Thousands more traded in our markets, all in violation of U.S. federal securities laws.
There are 6 specific decisions that Joe Biden made, either as vice president or president, that are very concerning to us, that we believe could potentially lead back to payments that were made to these LLCs that were then laundered down to the Biden family members. So you have to look at the number of the LLCs and look at the transactions and look at the limited bank records that we have to realize the great lengths to which this family went to try to disguise the sender of the money and then deceive the IRS. So, when we hear about the Biden family lawyers are meeting with the DOJ to talk about a potential indictment of Hunter Biden, I want to be very clear, Maria. It would be impossible for the Department of Justice to just cherry pick Hunter Biden for an indictment and not do anything to the 8 other Biden family members, because they were essentially doing the same thing and receiving the same types of payments from our adversaries around the world that Hunter Biden was doing.
So they were trying to make it look like the numbers were lower because they were dispersing money to other family members. How many family members were involved?
Right. Well, right now we have 9, but I believe in the end that number will be at least 12. I mean, this was the Biden family influence peddling scheme. And when people say, well, they were involved in ventures around the world, I haven't found a legitimate business on the Biden end, Maria. I found legitimate businesses that were paying the LLCs that were then turning around and laundering the money back to the Bidens. But I haven't found any legitimate business dealings on the Biden end. It looks like if there was a legitimate business dealing in any of these LLCs, it was influence peddling. And, if you want to get technical and if you want to get to a legal term, that's called being a foreign agent. They weren't registered as a foreign agent, and I'm sure the ethics laws would prevent immediate family members of high-ranking government officials from being foreign agents. Either way, this is bad. There are more laws that appear to me that have been broken than just tax evasion, and there are a lot more Bidens involved than just the president's son and his brother.
Wow. So the lawyers for Hunter Biden meeting with the DOJ this upcoming week. Do you expect Hunter Biden to get indicted? Do you expect other family members to have a target on their back or not? Or will this DOJ just ignore it all?
Well, they're in a pickle here, especially now with the IRS whistleblower. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason why Hunter Biden shouldn't have been indicted years ago, even before the last presidential election. But one of the challenges that I've learned that the Department of Justice, if there are any legitimate, serious people left in the DOJ that are really trying to do the right thing, is what do you do with this many family members of the president? I mean, there's not going to be anybody left for a Christmas picture if the DOJ did their job and went in there and indicted everyone that has any type of fingerprints involved in this influence peddling scheme. I mean, it's the entire family.
Congressman, can you name the 6 decisions that Biden made, whether as vice president or as president, that helped China so that we could better understand what he was doing for the money he was being paid?
Well, we're going to talk about that later. We hope to have a press conference very soon to update the American people. And if anyone in the mainstream media is going to really care about it, we have a lot of new information. Those 6 decisions are going to be involved in more investigations. I think some of them that the American people know about, some of them have been out there for a long time. But there are some new ones that I think have just popped on our radar screen here lately. Again, there's no reason and there's no explanation for this family to receive this many suspicious wires from adversaries around the world if Joe Biden weren't directly involved in some type of decision making, because I am confident that these people who were wiring the Bidens were expecting to get a return on their investment. And there isn't a single one of those family members that had the ability to do anything to influence foreign policy other than the big guy, Joe Biden.
So is that the reason he's so soft on China? The surveillance balloon was met with no response. The origins of COVID-19, no investigation. Is this the reason?
Nothing on COVID, nothing on TikTok, nothing on the spy balloon. China continues to steal our intellectual property. They continue to manipulate our currency. They're buying companies around the world that are a problem for us from a national security standpoint. And yet this president does nothing about China. It makes you wonder, Maria, whether or not he is in fact compromised because of the millions of dollars his family's already taken in from the Chinese Communist Party.
All right, we're going to continue to watch your investigation, sir. We so appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Maria.
House Oversight Committee Chairman Congressman James Comer. Thank you, sir. Quick break, and then a new era in the space race as communist China.
I am Christine Mann. I am retired from public health nursing and from the Army Reserve. My retirement funds allow me to enjoy what I love to do.
Was icing on the cake.
Well, spectacular pictures of American ingenuity on full display on Thursday in Texas as Elon Musk successfully launched his SpaceX Starship before minutes later exploding in the air. Despite the setback, Musk says they learned a lot for their next test in a few months. Musk is hoping to devise a spaceship powerful enough to send people to the moon and Mars. It comes as communist China is also aggressively funding their space programs, with President Xi's goal of putting astronauts on the moon by the end of the decade. Joining me right now is New York Republican Congresswoman Claudia Tenney, a member of both the House Ways and Means Committee and the House Science, Space and Technology Committee. Congresswoman, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks very much for being here.
Thank you so much, Mary. It's great to be on. This is exciting technology happening.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, first of all, look, there's always trial and error. We're going back into new frontiers. Kudos to Elon Musk and his team for even getting this rocket off the ground. I know it's going to take time, and we kind of dropped the space program, and we're back in it. And we've got to be, because China is threatening. And even recently, the NASA administrator said that China could very well try to take sovereignty over the moon, which is a violation of a UN treaty, of course, where we've agreed as nations not to have sovereignty over the moon or other planets such as Mars. But this is the beginning, and we have to keep up. Remember, China last year was able to send a supersonic missile around the Earth, and it took a press release from the Chinese before the Americans really found out that it was happening. And though we're dominating in satellites, China is able to produce attack satellites. They're able to scramble our signals. And this is really important technology. We have tremendous people and scientists working for us, but we need to continue to allow the private sector and public-private partnerships with NASA to make this happen and to make us dominant so China doesn't prevent us from, for example, having another spy balloon go across the United States without us even acting until it's already collected its data.
Yeah, and there seems to be a new axis of evil around China with regard to its relations with Iran right now as well. You just recently did a report on Iran. I want to slip in a short break and get your take on the other adversaries right now. We're also hearing that ISIS is back in Afghanistan. Congresswoman Claudia Tenney is with us this morning, and we'll be right back. Stay with us. New report recently about new terrorist activity. This as the Chinese Communist Party just acted as a power broker, bringing Iran together with Saudi Arabia. Your thoughts?
Yeah, first of all, this happened because China provides over 80% of the resources to Iran. So Iran is dependent on China. The Saudis look to America, and Joe Biden said that they were a pariah nation and we weren't going to support an ally about over 80 years. Certainly, Saudi Arabia has its flaws, but they're a much better ally to us than Iran is. And I came out with a report because back in 2021, under the National Defense Authorization Act, the Biden administration was compelled to come out with a report stating the status of the Iranian military. They didn't do that. But what I did is come out on a report on the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. That's a quasi-military, really a terrorist organization within Iran, where billions of dollars of Iranian money is diverted to support them. They quash rebellions. They secure the borders. They oppress their own people. They support terrorist proxies all over the world, including Yemen, Lebanon, you name it. And they're all over the world. They plot foreign terror, where they're actually talking about assassination of Mike Pompeo, John Bolton, and other people in the United States. A very dangerous group. We came out with a comprehensive report. It's at my website, tenney.house.gov. We've got to realize that China's foreign policy is transactional. They don't care about the ethics of what Iran is doing and how they're terrorizing the rest of the world. They care about getting their own influence. So it's really important that we get the report out and get the Biden administration to comply and actually stand up for America against our enemies.
And we're wondering the kind of influence China is having over Sudan, where we are seeing continued violence. Congresswoman, it's great to see you this morning. Thanks very much. Claudia Tenney in New York. That'll do it for us for